First off, the ending to this case is not what I was expecting. It went from 0 to 100. I didn't even think it was possible for a crime to stack its victims so effortlessly in the most gruesome way. It definitely holds true to the statement, wrong place at the wrong time. So if you get to the part of the case that I'm talking about, leave a comment down below about what you think and I will pin the best comment at the top. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post true crime videos. So if you're interested in these cases, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. And I would love you to subscribe and join the fam so you don't miss another video. As most of you know, I took a break for a couple of months and was at home for a majority of the time. And I wish I knew about this app back then, because who else wants to make a little bit of extra money on the side, especially when life throws the unexpected at you. Free Cash is an app where you can sign up for free and make money online by playing games on your phone. So the way it works is you sign up, you choose from a range of different game offers, you play till completed, and then you cash out your earnings. That's it. But before you begin playing, make sure to enable app tracking so Free Cash can reward you according to your progress. Free Cash also has 4.5 stars on Trustpilot, so it's legit. I enjoy playing Monopoly Go. It's so easy and fun. And I also made a couple of in-app purchases to speed up my progress, and then you get cash back for that. When you're ready, you can cash out through PayPal or even choose from a range of gift cards. It's so easy to use the app in your spare time while you're watching TV or traveling on the bus, train, tram. So try out Free Cash by clicking the link in the description box or scan the QR code on the screen to get a $5 bonus on your first offer if you're from the countries listed below. Also, depending on your country, your interface might look slightly different, but it works all the same. Thank you to Free Cash for sponsoring this channel and hope you guys enjoy. Let's jump in. Brett Anthony Ryan was born in the year 1980 into a family of 4 brothers. He was the third child to his parents, Susan and William, and grew up in Toronto, Canada. His father went by Bill and was a quiet and health-conscious guy who taught fitness classes at the local community center, and his mom, Susan, who went by Sue, was bubbly yet strict. She was a homemaker and loved gardening. The brothers grew up in a happy family, with the brothers doing well in their lives, well, most of them. Chris was the eldest brother and he was known to be shy publicly, but those that really knew him claimed that he was incredibly silly, and he worked as a Toronto Transit Commission fare collector. Leland was the second eldest and he was 2.5 years older than Brett, and he was the artistic one. He played the guitar and drums and studied photography at Ryerson and restored vintage cabinets. The youngest brother, Alexander, known as AJ, he was 6 years younger than Brett, but he was the smart one. He actually did so well in school that his parents ended up transferring him to a school for gifted kids. Brett was known to be the outgoing, confident, and good-looking one. He was always polite to others, he was always smiling, and he volunteered at Sick Kids, where he read to little kids and refereed Little League games in his neighborhood. He made friends easily and he was kind and generous. After high school, he went on to study at the University of Toronto, but he couldn't really deal with it, so he ended up dropping out. Following this, he had to move back in with his parents because he now racked up $60,000 in debt without a promising future career to pay this off. Brett had also struggled with depression on and off for years and never wanted to be pitied, so he kept his problems to himself. He instead projected this personality of confidence and positivity and wanted to be admired, successful, just like his brothers. So it's now 2007 and he's 26 years old, a college dropout, living with his parents, while many of his friends at this point in their lives had begun their careers in health, finance, and education. Brett was able to get a summer job working as a house painter, which eventually did turn into his full-time job. His life soon consisted of driving from odd job to job in his old car with no clear future ahead, and this was not the life that Brett had imagined for himself. So you would think that someone in their mid-20s with no full-time job, living at home with their parents, would try and hunker down, save some money to be able to build a life for themselves. But that's not what Brett did. Despite having a low income, he was still trying to live the high life. His $60K debt not only consisted of his failed college attempt, it also racked up because he would only wear $400 jeans, Versace belts and accessories, and soon he also purchased a brand new Ford F-150 truck. He wanted to live a lifestyle that he clearly could not afford. He was now becoming desperate. So he decided to do something about it. But it's not what you think. He didn't decide to work harder, take on more jobs, or even find a second job or a higher paying job. He had a different idea. He decided to rob a bank. On 20th October 2007, he walked into the CIBC bank an 8-minute drive away from his home. With his face and head wrapped up in bandages, his left arm in a sling, looking like he had just been released from the hospital, he approaches the bank teller. He hands over a note saying that inside his left arm sling, he had a gun. He demanded that $2,000 be handed over to him immediately. Afraid of what might happen next, the teller quickly gave him all the money she had, which was about $1,100. Then he ran off. When Brett arrived home, his heart was racing. He was excited but scared. He was waiting for the sound of the police sirens at his home, for them to just bust through the door and arrest him. But nothing happened. He was hooked. Following this, he went on an 8-month robbery spree, successfully robbing over 8 banks. Each attempt was well thought out and planned. He would scope each bank's location a few days prior to the actual robbery. After his second robbery with the bandages on his face, he now had a new disguise, which was a high-quality fake beard, sunglasses, a Gilligan-style fishing hat, a plaid shirt, and a dark jacket. He soon earned the name the Fake Bearded Bandit. During each of these robberies, he would steal between $2,000 to $4,000, and during the 8-month spree, he stole a total of $28,000. Now, if he was smart, he probably should have just paid off his debt with that money. So the reason why he was even able to keep this up for 8 months is because Brett had never been in trouble with the law before. He had never been arrested before. He left plenty of fingerprints at each crime scene, but no matches ever turned up in the police database. The police tried to catch the fake bearded bandit many times, even setting up 25 officers outside banks throughout the area for over 3 weeks, but they never succeeded. So by the summer of 2008, during one of the robberies, police spotted Brett's truck and then followed him home. They then watched him for 2 weeks, and by the time he entered his last bank on 20th June 2008, as he walked into the bank, Brett just had this funny feeling something was wrong, so he turned to walk out. As he did that, he was immediately arrested. In January 2009, Brett pled guilty to 8 counts of robbery and 8 counts of wearing a disguise. Brett was extremely remorseful and stated that his life had just gotten out of control. His family and friends testified to Brett's character, saying that he was a good guy and this was completely not in his nature, and that this act occurred out of desperation. I mean, this was somewhat true. Brett went from having 0 criminal history to robbing banks. The judge even felt sorry for Brett and agreed that he had a good background. He was a person with integrity and has given back to his community in the past. So this was definitely just a break from his character. So he sentenced Brett to 5 years in prison. However, just over a year later, Brett was released on parole. In late 2010, he would then move back in with his parents. Okay, so Brett now has a second chance. He can't mess this up. But as an ex-con, even though he only served, over a year in prison, his life was significantly harder. He couldn't just avoid this massive debt now, and he had to file for bankruptcy. He couldn't get a job easily because his criminal history was easily accessible on Google. He couldn't even paint houses anymore because prospective clients didn't want to let a thief into their homes. This is how they saw Brett. And this was hard on Brett, although he knew that it was all through his own doing. The neighbors also talked. Brett was a bank robber, had been in jail, and his parents were embarrassed and decided it was becoming a toxic environment. So they sold their big family home and moved into a smaller bungalow in Scarborough. These new neighbors knew nothing about Brett's past, and Sue went on to transform the bungalow's garden into a thing of beauty. During this time, Brett decided it was time for a fresh start. He began working many hours at a retail job, which was very low paying, but it had to do. He also sought treatment for his depression. His parents could see how hard he was working, how he was trying. So they decided to help him out financially, and following this, he enrolled into the University of Toronto again to pursue a degree in biophysics. In September 2011, he was set up on a blind date with a woman named Kristen. She was gorgeous, athletic, and had a job as a physiotherapist. She lived in this beautiful waterfront condo. She loved hiking and traveling, walking her dog, and just had a nice, normal, successful life. The kind of life that Brett wanted. They soon fell in love, and when Kristen found out about Brett's troubled past, she didn't care, and she accepted that it was his past. A couple of years later, in January 2013, Brett would move in to Kristen's condo, and this was really his dream. He had a gorgeous view, barbecues on the balcony, could swim in the building's indoor pool, and traveled often with Kristen. It was his dream life. Soon he proposed to Kristen with a Halo princess cut diamond ring. In early 2014, his father, Bill, would sadly pass away. This was really hard on his mom, Sue, and Brett offered to take care of his mom, helping her around the house, doing the things that his dad would do. And Sue offered to pay him for his time. Brett agreed because he really needed the money. His job was barely paying him much, and it seemed like Brett finally had his life back on track. But underneath the surface, the old Brett began to surface. In 2015, he dropped out of university once again, but this time he didn't tell anyone. He just couldn't cope with university. Everyone believed he was working hard pursuing this career. His finances also began unraveling, and I don't know if it was due to him buying an engagement ring he couldn't afford or living a life again that he couldn't afford. However, in 2016, surprisingly, he got a job offer with a Toronto-based tech firm. This was a huge win, as he could finally have a career and earn a proper income. After all, he was about to be married, be a husband, and have a lot more responsibilities. His family and Kristen were so excited and so happy for him. This was the turning point. However, the tech firm soon realized he never graduated, and also learned about his past as the fake bearded bandit and rescinded the job offer. This came as a huge blow to Brett, although it should not be that surprising to him given that he wasn't qualified for the job, so that should have not been surprising, but it's understandable that he was distraught. However, again, instead of being honest, he didn't let anyone know. He faked graduating and pretended he got the job. His family did find it strange that they were not invited to his graduation ceremony, but they were happy for him either way. Brett then began to fake going to work at this firm every day. He woke up every day for months, got ready, got into his car while Kristen got into her car and went to work. Some days he pretended he was working from home. Their wedding was set for 16th September 2016. Their wedding was also not cheap at $100 per person, and Kristen was also hoping to move out of their small condo following the wedding and began looking at larger homes. The pressure was on. In the meanwhile, Brett's mom, Sue, was so incredibly proud of him for turning his life around. She began bragging to friends about Brett graduating college with a degree, a great job, a waterfront condo, and his upcoming lavish wedding to a beautiful, successful woman. But Brett was back to square one. Although he did have these random retail jobs, he began pestering his mom for more jobs around the house so he could get paid. Sue was happy to help, knowing that he was trying so hard. So it's now August 2016, a month before the wedding. I don't even know how he managed to get this close to the wedding with so many expenses and keeping his family and Kristen in the dark the entire time, but he did. So At this point, he decided it was time to just come clean, to his mom at least. So he told her the truth. He dropped out of college, never got the job at the tech firm, and needed her support until he got a proper full-time job. He needed Sue to help him pay for things until the wedding and keep up this charade, but Kristen could never know. So he fully expected his mom to help because she had been so supportive of him. But instead, she was furious. She said, "Hell no. You need to come clean to Kristen or I will." On top of that, she was not going to give him $1 more until he came clean. Now, if you thought he was desperate before, he was hella desperate now. Kristen finding out would be the worst possible thing because not only would he lose her, he would lose the entire life that he had built and was going to have by marrying her. He knew that she would leave him and call off the wedding. He would go back to being a loser, living with his mom with no future. That couldn't happen. He was so close to having it all in his eyes. So unfortunately, his mom now became his target. And if this isn't sad and unexpected, I don't know what is, because how could Brett see his mom as the enemy when she helped him endlessly? Brett went from being a clean-cut guy to a bank robber to now a potential murderer. So Brett now had a new plan: to kill his mom. And he needed a weapon. After his mom's ultimatum, Brett continued to visit her home and help around the house. During one of these visits, he stashed his weapon of choice in her garage on a shelf behind some tools. The garage was a mess due to some home renovations, and he believed no one was going to be able to find it. So what was his weapon of choice? Since he was an ex-con, he was unable to buy a gun, so he decided on a crossbow. He didn't need a license for this and chose a Barnett Recruit Youth 30, a cheap and lightweight crossbow designed for teenage hunters, and he bought this one secondhand to avoid a paper trail. He also began concocting an alibi with homemade contraptions. Now, this is kind of genius, but kind of scary. He used a variety of timers to set off certain electronic devices. So one was this wooden spoon taped to a small fan, which lined up with the enter key of his laptop. So when the digital timer went off, it would set the fan into motion and the fan would turn and the spoon would click on a cursor hovering over an icon that would then open up a video on YouTube. So when he wanted, it would look like he was watching YouTube videos on his laptop. Another was a similar style contraption to activate a smartphone and a tablet with styluses. So when the timer would go off, the fans again would turn and the styluses would tap the phone and the tablet and send out pre-written messages to friends. These timers were set to go off multiple times in the day, the point being to leave digital traces at his home. This way, if the police ever accused him of anything, he could say, "What are you talking about? I was at home, chatting with friends and watching YouTube." It's kind of wild. On 25th August 2016, Brett and Kristen woke up and got ready for work as they usually did. Kristen for her real job and Brett for his pretend job. Once Kristen left the condo at 7:30 a.m., Brett made sure all of his contraptions for his digital alibi were set in motion and then he left the condo. But he couldn't risk being seen on the building's CCTV cameras. So instead, he went down 14 flights of stairs and out the back. It was a hot day, but Brett put on 2 pairs of jeans and carried his gym bag with spare clothing, a wig, and a bucket hat, and some broadhead bolts, which are arrows for the crossbow. So the reason for the 2 pairs of jeans in his eyes was that if the first pair of jeans got any stains on them, he could just take that pair off and then have a fresh pair underneath. He then caught the train to his mom's house and he arrived at about 10 a.m. Sue was not expecting Brett to even come over that day, but once he was there, he just began pleading with her to understand where he was coming from, that he had so much to lose if Kristen found out the truth. This turned into a heated argument, and Sue then called her eldest son, Chris, to come and deal with Brett. Brett then realized that Sue was not going to change her mind. So he then heads to the garage to get his weapon. However, he did not expect Sue to follow him. Crossbows take a while to actually load, so he knew that if he tried to load his weapon in front of her, she would see him and try and run. So instead, once his mother entered the garage, he grabbed one of the arrows with the 3 sharp serrated blades that formed a point and stabbed her in the cheek and the ear. He fought her to the ground, and then a stack of hardwood flooring fell on top of her. Seeing this as his opportunity, he then strangled her to death with a piece of nylon rope. Now, Brett knew that his mom had called his brother Chris, and this next part is what I was talking about before. The way this next part plays out is wild. Was Brett in a murderous daze, or could this have ended differently? Brett knew he had to prepare the crossbow, which he did. He loaded the crossbow for his next victim, his brother Chris. He hid behind the garage door and soon heard Chris calling out for his mom. The garage was detached from the main house, so I'm assuming that Chris checked the house first before coming to the garage. When he did, Brett walked up quietly behind him, aimed his crossbow at Chris, and fired at very close range. The arrow went through Chris's neck and got stuck in his mouth. His brother died instantly. He then grabbed Chris's body and stacked it on top of his mother's dead body. Blood filled the garage floor. Now, you would think this would be the end, that Brett would change his clothes, put on his disguise, and just make a run for it. But again, wrong place, wrong time. His youngest brother, AJ, suddenly arrived at the house. Brett was in too deep. In his mind, he had to kill him too. He didn't have time to load his crossbow, so he walked out of the garage with an arrow in hand and met AJ on a walkway near the house. He attacked AJ and they fell to the ground, but soon Brett stabbed AJ in the neck. Then Brett's other brother, Leland, was asleep in the house upstairs. And after hearing the altercation outside, he looked out from his bedroom window and saw AJ just bleeding on the driveway. Leland rang 911 and ran to see what was going on. Brett suddenly sees Lee in the doorway of the house and then runs after him. The 2 brothers struggled and fought throughout various rooms of the house, all while Brett was soaked in the blood of his dead family members. At this point, while Brett and Lee are fighting in the house, AJ crawled his way towards the street, and then suddenly Lee comes running towards him. Lee had escaped the house and ran to a neighbor to get help before passing out. He had sustained many cuts and a severe head wound. It was then at this point that Brett knew he was done. The police were coming. So he went inside the home, got a bottle of water from the fridge, came to the front step and drank his water. And he just waited. When the police arrived, AJ was still alive, but he died before the paramedics arrived. Brett then says, "I probably should have taken him to the hospital. The guys in the garage are dead. Crossbow to the head. It was me." This guy basically slaughtered his entire family, all because of one lie. After Brett was arrested, the police went to Kristen's condo and found all these homemade alibi contraptions. They actually evacuated the entire building, not knowing what these devices were, as they could have been bombs. When Brett was questioned about all these devices, he claimed that he never activated any of the contraptions. The fans were found to have not even been plugged in. Brett was claiming that he had a change of heart before leaving the condo to confront his mom. For the trial, Brett hired a famous lawyer, John Rosen, known as Mr. Murder, who defended people like Paul Bernardo, but despite this, he pled guilty. However, he stated that he never wanted to kill his mother, just threaten her. It's clear though that if his mother didn't submit to his threats and if his other brothers never showed up, Brett could have killed her with the crossbow, switch out his clothes, wearing a disguise, and sneak out of the home and return to his condo, possibly using these digital alibis. as a cover. Brett was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of his mother, Sue Ryan. It's possible that due to this digital alibi not actually being activated, resulted in a second-degree conviction. However, for his brother Chris, he was convicted of first-degree murder because he knew Chris was going to arrive and he hid behind the garage door. He loaded the crossbow, waiting to kill him. And this was the one victim that he actually used the crossbow on. He was convicted of second-degree murder in AJ's death because AJ was never supposed to come home, therefore never an intended victim. And Brett was convicted of attempted murder for his attack on his brother, Leland. Leland told the court how traumatizing it was to watch his entire family be slaughtered by his younger brother, that he now suffers from severe trauma and anxiety, how he couldn't leave his house at all, couldn't sleep or concentrate, how the image of his little brother AJ dying on his driveway was forever embedded in his mind. During his sentencing, Brett apologized to his remaining family, saying how sick with grief he was and how sorry he was for what he did. Strangely, the judge was also quite sympathetic towards Brett, the same way the first judge had been for the robberies, stating that he appreciated Brett's remorse and sincerity, that Brett was too a victim of his own web of lies. Brett received concurrent life sentences for each of the murders, plus 10 years for the attempted murder of Leland. He will be eligible for parole in 2041. He will be 60 years old by then, which gives him plenty of life to live. I'm not sure what Kristen's side of the story is. I can't imagine her shock and horror. The murders took place 3 weeks before they were supposed to get married, a time that was supposed to be joyous and a celebration. The city of Toronto was shocked by this case, and mental health organizations offered counseling sessions to those affected by the crime, emphasizing the importance of early intervention for those struggling with their mental health. This case reminds me of the Jennifer Pan case I covered a couple years ago, which again highlights the dangers of living a life built solely on lies and facades. That's it, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you in the next video. Besitos. Bye.